A wealthy white millionaire named Matthew gets his black maid pregnant and kicks her out, fearing for his reputation. 13 years later, Amara returns, but with a revelation that will turn Matthew's world upside down. What secret does she carry, and how will it change both their fates forever? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Matthew Spencer stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, gazing out at the city skyline. The view was breathtaking, a testament to his success and the empire he had built. But as he looked at his reflection in the glass, he saw a man who had everything and nothing at the same time. His designer suit fit perfectly, not a wrinkle in sight. His silver hair was neatly combed, giving him an air of distinguished authority. To the outside world, Matthew Spencer was the picture of success. But inside he felt hollow. With a heavy sigh, he turned away from the window and walked to his desk. His eyes fell on a framed photo of Eleanor, his wife. She was smiling in the picture, but Matthew couldn't remember the last time he'd seen that smile in person. "Mr. Spencer?" His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your wife is here to see you." Matthew's heart skipped a beat. Eleanor rarely visited him at work. "Send her in," he said, his voice steady despite the sudden nervousness he felt. The door opened and Eleanor walked in. She was as beautiful as ever, dressed in a simple yet elegant dress. But her eyes, once full of warmth and love, now seemed distant and guarded. "Eleanor," Matthew said, forcing a smile. "What a pleasant surprise." Eleanor didn't return the smile. "We need to talk, Matthew." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken pain. Matthew gestured to the plush chairs in front of his desk. "Of course. Please sit down." As they sat, the silence stretched on. Matthew found himself wishing for the constant buzz of phone calls and meetings that usually filled his day. Anything would be better than this deafening quiet. Finally, Eleanor spoke. "I saw Dr. Roberts today." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "The latest treatment. It didn't work." Matthew felt a pang in his chest. He knew how much Eleanor wanted a child, how each failed attempt broke her heart a little more. But he had long ago buried his own feelings about their struggles with infertility, focusing instead on his work and his image. "I'm sorry," he said, the words feeling inadequate even as they left his lips. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Are you, Matthew? Sometimes I wonder if you even care anymore." Her words stung, but Matthew didn't know how to respond. He had become so good at hiding his emotions, at presenting a strong front to the world, that he didn't know how to let his guard down anymore, even with his wife. "Of course I care," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Eleanor shook her head, a sad smile on her face. "You've built this amazing empire, Matthew, but our marriage, it's crumbling, and I don't know if you even notice." Matthew wanted to reach out to her to comfort her, but something held him back. Pride? Fear? He wasn't sure. Instead, he sat there watching as the woman he had once promised to love and cherish wiped away her tears. "I miss us, Matthew," Eleanor said softly. "I miss the way we used to be. Before the treatments. Before all of this." She gestured around the opulent office. Matthew felt a lump form in his throat. He missed it too, more than he cared to admit. But admitting it would mean acknowledging the cracks in the perfect life he had worked so hard to create. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Matthew's office, a soft knock on the door broke the tense silence that had settled between him and Eleanor. Matthew looked up, grateful for the interruption. "Come in," he called out, his voice a little too eager. The door opened slowly, and Amara, one of the mansion's maids, stepped inside. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and her hands trembled as she clutched her apron. "Mr. Spencer," she said softly, her gaze darting nervously between Matthew and Eleanor. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I need to speak with you. It's urgent." Eleanor stood up, smoothing out her dress. "I should go," she said, her voice tinged with resignation. "We can finish this conversation later, Matthew." As Eleanor left the room, Matthew felt a mixture of relief and dread. He turned his attention to Amara, noticing how pale she looked in the fading light. "What is it, Amara?" he asked, his tone sharper than he intended. Amara took a deep breath, her eyes filling with tears. "Mr. Spencer, I'm pregnant." The words hit Matthew like a physical blow. He stared at her, his mind racing. Their affair had been brief, a moment of weakness he had sworn to forget. But now, with those 3 simple words, his carefully constructed world threatened to crumble. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Amara nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Yes, sir. I'm certain." Panic rose in Matthew's chest. His thoughts turned to Eleanor, to his reputation, to everything he stood to lose. Fear and anger battled within him, and in that moment, his pride won out. "This can't be happening," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. Then louder, "Do you have any idea what this could do to me? To my marriage? My reputation?" Amara flinched at his harsh tone. "I'm sorry, Mr. Spencer, I didn't mean for this to happen. I thought you should know." Matthew's mind raced, searching for a solution that would make this problem disappear. He walked to his safe, hidden behind a painting on the wall, and opened it with shaking hands. "Here," he said, pulling out a thick envelope and thrusting it at Amara. "This should be more than enough to take care of everything." Amara stared at the envelope, her eyes wide with disbelief. "But Mr. Spencer, Take it and leave," Matthew cut her off, his voice cold and final. "I want you gone by morning, and don't ever try to contact me again. Do you understand?" Tears streamed down Amara's face as she clutched the envelope to her chest. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she gave a small nod and turned to leave. As the door closed behind her, Matthew slumped into his chair, the weight of what he had done settling heavily on his shoulders. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Amara stood at the gates of the Spencer estate, her small suitcase clutched tightly in one hand. Tears streamed down her face, but she wiped them away with determination. The envelope of money Matthew had given her felt heavy in her pocket, a bitter reminder of his rejection. With a deep breath, Amara turned and began walking down the long driveway. Each step felt like a mile as she moved away from the life she had known. The weight of her unborn child seemed to press upon her, both a burden and a source of strength. As she reached the end of the driveway, Amara paused and looked back at the grand mansion one last time. The rising sun cast a golden glow on the windows, making the house shimmer like a mirage. For a moment, she remembered the happier times she had spent there, the dreams she had dared to hope for. But those dreams were shattered now, replaced by a harsh reality. "We'll be okay," Amara whispered, placing a hand on her still flat stomach. "I promise you that." With renewed resolve, Amara turned away from the mansion and started down the road. She had no clear destination in mind, only the certainty that she needed to get as far away from Matthew Spencer as possible. The world stretched out before her, vast and unknown, but she refused to let fear overtake her. As she walked, Amara's mind raced with plans and worries. Where would she go? How would she support herself and her baby? The money Matthew had given her wouldn't last forever, and she had no family to turn to for help. But with each step, her determination grew stronger. "I'll find a way," she murmured to herself. "We'll build a new life, just the two of us." The sun climbed higher in the sky as Amara made her way to the bus station. She purchased a ticket to a city she had only heard of, far enough away that she felt safe from Matthew's reach. As she settled into her seat on the bus, Amara placed a protective hand over her belly. "It's just you and me now, little one," she said softly. "But I promise, I'll give you all the love in the world." As the bus pulled away from the station, Amara watched the familiar landscape fade into the distance. Her heart ached with the pain of Matthew's rejection and the loss of the life she had known. But beneath that pain, a small spark of hope began to grow. She may have lost everything she thought she wanted, but she had gained something far more precious, the chance to be a mother. 13 years had passed since Amara had left Matthew Spencer's mansion with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. Now she stood tall and confident, her designer suit a testament to her success as a lawyer. The years had been kind to her, etching only faint lines around her eyes that spoke of both laughter and determination. Beside her stood Noah, her pride and joy. At 13, he was already showing signs of the man he would become, intelligent, kind, and driven. His dark eyes, so like his father's, sparkled with excitement as they approached the familiar gates of the Spencer estate. "Mom, are you sure about this?" Noah asked, his voice tinged with concern. Amara squeezed his hand reassuringly. "We have to try, sweetheart. This is your future we're talking about." As they walked up the long driveway, Amara's mind raced with memories. She had worked tirelessly over the years, juggling law school and single motherhood, all to give Noah the life he deserved. And now, with his acceptance to Westbrook Academy, one of the most prestigious schools in the country, she knew she had to face her past. The mansion loomed before them, just as imposing as Amara remembered. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. This time, she wasn't a frightened maid begging for help. She was Amara Lawson, respected attorney and devoted mother. While walking through the huge walls of the house, Amara thoughts his flying, saying, "It wasn't about the money," she reminded herself. No, she had plenty of that now. This was about something far deeper. Noah deserved to know where he came from, and Matthew deserved to take responsibility, whether he was ready or not. Amara didn't need Matthew's help anymore, but she wanted him to be part of Noah's life. Slowly, carefully, she would build that bridge, one step at a time. With trembling fingers, Amara pressed the doorbell. The sound echoed through the house, each chime seeming to reverberate through her very bones. As they waited, she silently prayed for the strength to face Matthew again. Matthew Spencer sat behind his imposing mahogany desk, reviewing the latest financial reports. His brow furrowed as he focused on the numbers, oblivious to the world outside his office. Suddenly, the intercom buzzed, startling him from his concentration. "Mr. Spencer," his secretary's voice crackled through the speaker. "There's a woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she insists it's urgent." Matthew sighed, irritated by the interruption. "Tell her to make an appointment like everyone else," he snapped. "Sir, she says her name is Amara. She claims you'll want to speak with her." The color drained from Matthew's face. Amara. A name he hadn't heard in 13 years, a name that still haunted his dreams. With a shaky hand, he pressed the intercom button. "Send her in," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. As they walked up the long driveway, Amara's mind raced with memories of her last day at the estate. She had left with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. Now she returned with a brilliant son and a life she had built from scratch. The door opened, and Amara walked in. Matthew's breath caught in his throat. She was even more beautiful than he remembered, her eyes filled with a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. But it wasn't Amara who held his attention for long. Behind her stood a young boy, about 13 years old, with familiar blue eyes that mirrored his own. "Hello, Matthew," Amara said, her voice steady and controlled. "It's been a long time." Matthew stood up, his legs feeling weak. "Amara," he breathed. Who is?" He couldn't finish the sentence, his eyes fixed on the boy. Amara placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "This is Noah," she said softly. Noah looked up at Matthew, curiosity and apprehension mingling in his eyes. "Hi," he said quietly. Amara asked Noah to wait outside the room. As Noah walks by the door, Matthew looked at him carefully. Amara then started, "Noah is your son." The words hit Matthew like a physical blow. He stumbled back, gripping the edge of his desk for support. "My son?" he repeated, his voice barely audible. Matthew couldn't tear his gaze away from the boy. He saw himself in Noah's features, in the set of his jaw and the curve of his nose. It was like looking at a younger version of himself. Amara broke the tense silence. Noah has been accepted to Westfield Academy, she explained. It's a prestigious school, one of the best in the country, but we need financial help to make it happen. Matthew's mind reeled, trying to process everything. Why now? He asked, his voice hoarse. After all these years, why come to me now? Because Noah deserves the best education possible, Amara replied firmly. And because it's time you took responsibility for your actions. Matthew's shock began to give way to disbelief and suspicion. He straightened up, his businessman instincts kicking in. How do I know he's really mine? He demanded. This could be some kind of scam. Hurt flashed across Noah's face and Amara's eyes hardened. You know he's yours, Matthew, she said coldly. Just look at him, but if you need proof, we can arrange a paternity test. Matthew's gaze darted between Amara, his mind a whirlwind of emotions and doubts. I need time to think, he stammered. This is all so sudden. Of course, Amara replied, her voice softening slightly. We'll give you time. But Noah's future is at stake here, Matthew. Don't let your pride get in the way of doing the right thing. That night, Matthew paced the length of his study, his mind in turmoil. The soft glow of the desk lamp cast long shadows across the room, mirroring the dark thoughts that plagued him. He loosened his tie, feeling suffocated by the weight of his guilt. What have I done? He whispered to himself, running a hand through his graying hair. The image of Noah's face kept flashing in his mind, those blue eyes so much like his own, filled with hope and uncertainty. Matthew's heart clenched painfully. He had a son, a brilliant, talented son who needed his help. But then Eleanor's face appeared in his thoughts, her kind smile tinged with the sadness that had become all too familiar over the years. Their marriage was already hanging by a thread, strained by years of disappointment and growing distance. If she found out about Noah, it would surely be the final blow. Matthew slumped into his leather armchair, burying his face in his hands. I can't tell her, he muttered. It would destroy her. Destroy us. He glanced at the family portrait on his desk, taken years ago when he and Eleanor still smiled easily in each other's presence. The guilt gnawed at him, threatening to consume him whole. How could he keep such a massive secret from his wife? But how could he shatter the fragile peace they had managed to maintain? As the night wore on, Matthew's thoughts raced in circles. He imagined helping Noah, secretly funding his education, maybe even getting to know him. But each scenario ended with Eleanor discovering the truth, her face contorted in pain and betrayal. There has to be a way, he muttered, pacing once more. Some way to make this right without losing everything. But deep down, Matthew knew there was no easy solution. Every path forward was fraught with risk and potential heartbreak. He was trapped in a web of his own making, with no clear way out. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Matthew still had no answers. He had a son who needed him, a wife he couldn't bear to hurt, and a lifetime of choices closing in around him. The weight of it all pressed down on him, leaving him feeling more lost and alone than ever before. The next day, Matthew found himself sitting in his car outside a small cafe, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. He had agreed to meet Noah here, under the pretense of being a family friend interested in supporting the boy's education. His heart raced as he spotted Amara and Noah approaching the cafe. Taking a deep breath, Matthew stepped out of the car and walked towards them. As he drew closer, he was struck by how much Noah resembled him. The boy had his eyes, his chin, even the way he carried himself. Mr. Spencer, Amara greeted him coolly. This is Noah. Noah extended his hand, a polite smile on his face. It's nice to meet you again, sir. Matthew shook Noah's hand, surprised by the firmness of the boy's grip. It's nice to meet you too, Noah. Shall we go inside? As they settled into a booth, Matthew couldn't help but study Noah's face. The boy was poised and confident, his eyes bright with intelligence. So, Noah, Matthew began, trying to keep his voice steady, I hear you've been accepted into Westfield Academy. That's quite an achievement. Noah's face lit up. Yes, sir. I've always dreamed of going there. Their law program is one of the best in the country. Law program? Matthew raised an eyebrow, feeling a surge of pride. You want to be a lawyer? Noah nodded enthusiastically. Ever since I was little. Mom always says I have a knack for arguing my case. He grinned at Amara, who smiled back fondly. As Noah spoke about his aspirations, Matthew felt a growing ache in his chest. This remarkable young man was his son, and he had missed out on every moment of his life. He had never heard Noah's first words, never taught him to ride a bike, never cheered at his school plays. That's very impressive, Noah, Matthew said, his voice thick with emotion. You seem to have a clear vision for your future. He's always been driven, Amara added softly. Top of his class since kindergarten. Matthew nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He watched as Noah animatedly described a mock trial he had participated in at school, gesturing with his hands just as Matthew did when he got excited about something. The weight of his past actions bore down on Matthew. He had missed so much, all because of his fear and selfishness. This bright, charming boy had grown up without a father, and Matthew had deprived himself of the joy of watching his son grow. As the meeting drew to a close, Matthew found himself wishing it could go on longer. He wanted to know everything about Noah, to make up for lost time. But he knew it wasn't that simple. Thank you for meeting with me, Noah, Matthew said as they stood to leave. I'm very impressed by you. Noah beamed at the compliment. Thank you, Mr. Spencer. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. As Matthew watched Noah and Amara walk away, he felt a mix of pride, regret, and a newfound determination. He knew he had to find a way to be part of Noah's life, no matter the cost. As the weeks passed, Matthew found himself spending more time with Noah under the guise of mentoring him. They met at the cafe regularly, discussing Noah's studies and future plans. With each meeting, Matthew's pride in his son grew stronger. One afternoon, as they sat in the cafe, Noah excitedly shared his latest accomplishment. I got an A+ on my history essay, Mr. Spencer. The teacher said it was the best in the class. Matthew's chest swelled with pride. That's fantastic, Noah. Your hard work is really paying off. As Noah beamed at the praise, Matthew felt a pang of guilt. He longed to tell Noah the truth, to embrace him as his son. But the fear of losing everything held him back. Later that evening, Matthew met with Amara in a quiet park. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grass. He's doing so well, Amara, Matthew said, his voice filled with both joy and regret. I can't believe how smart and kind he is. Amara nodded, a small smile on her face. He is. And Eleanor deserves to know the truth, Matthew. Matthew's smile faded. I know, but I can't. Eleanor. My company. Everything I've built. The longer you wait, the more painful it will be, Amara warned, her eyes filled with concern. For everyone involved. Especially Noah. Matthew ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of his secret crushing him. I don't know how to tell Eleanor. She'll never forgive me. Maybe not, Amara said softly. But living with this lie is hurting you, and it will hurt Noah when he finds out. And he will find out, Matthew. Secrets like this don't stay buried forever. As Matthew walked home that night, Amara's words echoed in his mind. The guilt he felt was growing stronger with each passing day. He knew she was right, but the thought of confessing everything to Eleanor terrified him. When he entered his house, he found Eleanor sitting in the living room, reading a book. She looked up as he entered, her eyes questioning. You're home late again, she said, her voice tinged with suspicion. Matthew's heart raced. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. The truth was on the tip of his tongue, but fear held it back. I had a late meeting, he lied, hating himself for it. Eleanor nodded, but Matthew could see the doubt in her eyes. As he walked upstairs to their bedroom, the weight of his secret felt heavier than ever before. As the weeks passed, Matthew's bond with Noah continued to grow stronger. Their meetings at the cafe became more frequent, and Matthew found himself looking forward to each moment spent with his son. Noah's infectious enthusiasm and quick wit reminded Matthew of himself at that age, and he couldn't help but feel a surge of pride every time Noah shared a new accomplishment. One afternoon, as they sat in their usual spot, Noah excitedly recounted his latest debate club victory. Matthew listened intently, his eyes shining with admiration. "That's incredible, Noah. You've got a real talent for argumentation," Matthew praised, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. Noah beamed at the compliment. "Thanks, Mr. Spencer, I really enjoy it. Maybe I'll be a lawyer like you someday." Matthew's smile faltered for a moment as guilt washed over him. He wanted nothing more than to tell Noah the truth, to claim him as his son. But fear held him back, and he simply nodded, forcing a smile. As Matthew spent more time with Noah, his absences from home became more noticeable. Eleanor began to pick up on his distraction and frequent disappearances. She observed him with a mix of concern and suspicion, noticing how he'd check his phone more often and rush out the door with vague explanations. One evening, the Spencers hosted a family dinner at their home. Matthew's parents and Eleanor's sister were in attendance, filling the dining room with chatter and laughter. As Eleanor set down a platter of roast chicken, she couldn't help but notice Matthew's distracted gaze. "Matthew, dear, could you pass the potatoes?" Eleanor asked, her voice cutting through his thoughts. Matthew blinked, startled. "Oh, of course," he mumbled, handing over the dish. Eleanor's sister raised an eyebrow. "You seem a bit out of it, Matthew. Everything okay at work?" Matthew forced a smile. "Just busy, that's all. You know how it is." Eleanor watched him closely, her suspicion growing. As the dinner progressed, she decided to broach the subject that had been bothering her. "So, Matthew," she began, her tone casual but her eyes sharp, "you've been out quite a lot lately. Any exciting new projects keeping you busy?" Matthew felt his heart rate quicken. He took a sip of water, buying himself a moment to think. "Oh, just the usual. A few new clients, some mentoring work." "Mentoring?" Eleanor's mother chimed in, interested. "That's wonderful, Matthew. Who are you mentoring?" Matthew's mind raced as he tried to come up with a plausible explanation. "Just some promising young interns at the firm," he lied, hating how easily the deceit came to him now. Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly. "You've never mentioned any mentoring program before. Is this something new?" Matthew nodded, feeling himself sinking deeper into the web of lies. "Yes, it's a new initiative we're trying out, giving back to the community and all that." As the conversation moved on to other topics, Matthew could feel Eleanor's gaze lingering on him. He knew she wasn't fully convinced by his explanation, and guilt gnawed at his insides. With each passing day, he felt more entangled in his deceptions, unsure of how to find his way out. As the day of Noah's academic award ceremony approached, Matthew found himself in a whirlwind of emotions. Pride, excitement, and guilt battled within him as he contemplated attending the event. When Noah extended the invitation, his eyes shining with hope, Matthew couldn't bring himself to refuse. "I'd be honored to come, Noah," he had said, his voice thick with emotion. On the day of the ceremony, Matthew made excuses to Eleanor about a late meeting and slipped out of the house. His heart raced as he drove to the school, a mix of anticipation and nervousness coursing through him. The auditorium was already filling up when Matthew arrived. He chose a seat in the back row, hoping to remain inconspicuous. As he settled in, he couldn't help but feel like an outsider, a secret observer in a world he should have been part of all along. The ceremony began, and Matthew's eyes scanned the rows of students until he spotted Noah. The boy sat tall and proud, his academic gown crisp and neat. Matthew's breath caught in his throat as he realized how much Noah had grown and matured without him. As the principal began calling names, Matthew leaned forward in his seat, straining to hear. When Noah's name was announced, Matthew's heart swelled with pride. He watched as Noah confidently strode across the stage, accepting his award with a bright smile. "Noah Carter," the principal's voice rang out, "for outstanding achievement in debate and public speaking." Matthew's eyes misted over as he watched Noah shake hands with the principal. He thought of all the conversations they'd had about Noah's passion for debate, and how he'd encouraged the boy without revealing their true connection. Now, seeing Noah's success, Matthew felt a bittersweet ache in his chest. As Noah returned to his seat, clutching his award, Matthew noticed Amara in the front row. She beamed at her son, clapping enthusiastically. Matthew's guilt intensified as he realized how much he had missed, how many milestones he hadn't been there for. The ceremony continued, and Noah's name was called several more times for various academic achievements. With each award, Matthew's pride grew, but so did his sense of regret. He marveled at how much Noah had accomplished without his support, how Amara had raised such an exceptional young man on her own. As the ceremony drew to a close, Matthew remained in his seat, watching as families gathered to congratulate their children. He saw Noah rush to Amara, throwing his arms around her in a joyful embrace. Matthew longed to join them, to openly celebrate Noah's achievements, but he knew he couldn't. As the families began to disperse, Matthew lingered near the exit, his heart heavy with conflicting emotions. He watched as Amara and Noah shared a quiet moment, their faces glowing with pride and joy. When Noah excused himself to speak with his teachers, Amara's eyes met Matthew's across the room. Her expression hardened as she made her way towards him. "We need to talk," Amara said firmly, her voice low but intense. Matthew nodded, following her to a quiet corner of the auditorium. The sounds of celebration faded into the background as they faced each other. Amara took a deep breath before speaking. "Matthew, I've been patient. I've allowed you to be a part of Noah's life, even if it's been from a distance. But this can't go on forever. He deserves to know the truth." Matthew's shoulders sagged. "I know, Amara. I don't know how to tell him." "If you're going to be in Noah's life, it has to be all or nothing," Amara said, her eyes never leaving Matthew's face. "He's not a child anymore. He's old enough to understand, and he deserves to know who his father is." Matthew ran a hand through his hair, his guilt and fear evident in every gesture. "You're right. I promise I'll come clean to Noah. He deserves that much." Amara's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "And Eleanor? When are you going to tell her?" At the mention of his wife's name, Matthew's face paled. He hesitated, his words catching in his throat. I need more time. It's complicated, Amara. You don't understand what this could do to my marriage." Amara's eyes flashed with anger. "No, Matthew. You don't understand what your lies are already doing to your family, to Noah. The longer you wait, the more damage you'll cause. To everyone." Matthew looked away, unable to meet Amara's gaze. "I just need a little more time to figure out how to tell her." "Time isn't on your side, Matthew," Amara said, her voice softening but still resolute. "Noah is growing up fast. He's asking questions about his father. I've protected you all these years, but I won't lie to my son anymore. If you don't tell him soon, I will." Matthew's head snapped up, his eyes wide with panic. "You can't do that, Amara. Please let me handle this my way." Amara shook her head, her determination evident in every word. "I'm sorry, Matthew, but this isn't just about you anymore. It's about Noah, and he deserves the truth. You have 1 week to come clean to both Noah and Eleanor. After that, I'll have no choice but to tell Noah myself." Matthew's car pulled into the driveway of his sprawling mansion, the engine's quiet purr cutting off as he turned the key. He sat there for a moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his mind racing with thoughts of Noah, Amara, and the looming deadline. With a heavy sigh, he stepped out of the car and made his way to the front door. As he entered, the sound of rustling paper and the soft click of heels on marble greeted him. Eleanor appeared from the study, a stack of invitations in her hands. "Oh, you're home," she said, her voice carrying a hint of surprise and something else. Disappointment, perhaps. Matthew forced a smile. "Hi, dear, how's the planning for the gala coming along?" Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly. "It's going well, no thanks to you. Where have you been, Matthew? I tried calling you earlier." "I had a late meeting," Matthew lied smoothly, avoiding her gaze as he loosened his tie. "You know how these things can drag on." Eleanor set the invitations down on a nearby table, her movements deliberate and controlled. Yes, I do know. Just like I know when my husband is keeping something from me. Matthew's heart raced, but he kept his face neutral. What do you mean? You've been distant, Matthew, more than usual, Eleanor said, her voice tinged with frustration. You're constantly checking your phone, disappearing for hours without explanation. It's like you're not even here anymore. Matthew swallowed hard, guilt gnawing at his insides. I've just been busy with work, that's all. You know how important this quarter is for the company. Eleanor stepped closer, her eyes searching his face. Is that really all it is? Because I can't help but feel like there's something you're not telling me. Matthew felt trapped, cornered by Eleanor's suspicions and his own lies. He wanted to tell her everything, to unburden himself of the secret that had been weighing him down for years. But fear held him back, fear of losing everything he had built. Eleanor, please, he said, his voice strained. Can we not do this now? I'm tired, and we have the gala to prepare for. Eleanor's face fell, disappointment evident in her eyes. Of course, she said, her voice cold. Heaven forbid we actually talk about our marriage or the growing distance between us. You're right. Let's focus on the gala instead. She turned away, picking up the invitations once more. I need you to look over the guest list and seating arrangements. Try to find some time in your busy schedule for that, won't you? With that, Eleanor walked back to the study, leaving Matthew alone in the foyer, the weight of his secrets pressing down on him more heavily than ever. Matthew stood by the window in his home office, gazing out at the manicured lawn. His mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions as he pictured Noah standing there, tossing a baseball with him on a lazy Sunday afternoon. The image brought a bittersweet smile to his face. He could almost hear Noah's laughter, see the boy's eyes light up with joy. Matthew imagined introducing Noah to Eleanor, watching as she embraced him as her own. In this daydream, they were a family, whole and happy. But reality crashed down on him like a cold wave. Matthew's hands clenched into fists as he struggled with the weight of his choices. Could he really be the father Noah deserved? The boy was so bright, so full of potential. He needed guidance, support, and love. All the things Matthew had denied him for 13 years. I've missed so much, Matthew whispered to himself, his voice thick with regret. He turned from the window, his eyes falling on a framed photo of Eleanor on his desk. Her smile, once so warm and inviting, now seemed to accuse him. Matthew picked up the frame, tracing Eleanor's face with his finger. What have I done? He murmured. The thought of confessing everything to Eleanor made his stomach churn. He could already see the hurt in her eyes, the betrayal etched across her face. Their marriage, already strained by years of emotional distance and the pain of infertility, might not survive this revelation. Matthew set the photo down and sank into his chair, burying his face in his hands. He was torn between two worlds, the life he had built with Eleanor and the new one that was emerging with Noah. Both felt real, both felt right, but he knew he couldn't have both. If he chose to be in Noah's life openly, he risked losing Eleanor and everything they had built together. The scandal would likely affect his business, his reputation in the community. Years of hard work and carefully cultivated relationships could crumble in an instant. But if he continued to keep Noah a secret, he would be denying his son the father he deserved. He would be missing out on watching Noah grow, on being there for his triumphs and struggles. The thought of Noah facing life's challenges without him by his side filled Matthew with a deep, aching sadness. There has to be a way, Matthew said aloud, desperation creeping into his voice. There has to be a way to make this right. But as he sat there, surrounded by the trappings of his successful life, Matthew knew that any path forward would come at a great cost. The truth would hurt Eleanor deeply, shaking the foundations of their marriage. Yet keeping the secret was slowly eating away at him, poisoning his relationships with both Eleanor and Noah. Matthew stood up, pacing the room as he grappled with his dilemma. He wanted to be the father Noah needed, to make up for lost time and be there for his son's future. But the price of that choice seemed impossibly high. Eleanor sat at her vanity, absently brushing her hair as she stared at her reflection. The worry lines around her eyes seemed deeper lately, etched by the growing distance between her and Matthew. She set the brush down with a sigh, her decision made. The next morning, Eleanor discreetly met with a private investigator in a small cafe across town. She felt a twinge of guilt as she handed over an envelope containing Matthew's recent schedules and credit card statements. "I just need to know what's going on," Eleanor explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's been so distant lately, always distracted, always rushing off." The investigator nodded sympathetically. "We'll get to the bottom of this, Mrs. Spencer. I'll be in touch soon." As Eleanor left the cafe, her heart felt heavy. She never thought she'd be the kind of wife who spied on her husband, but the tension in their marriage had become unbearable. She longed for the days when they shared everything, when trust flowed easily between them. Meanwhile, across town, Matthew sat in his car outside Noah's school. He watched as students streamed out of the building, searching for Noah's familiar face. When he spotted the boy, Matthew's heart swelled with pride and ached with regret. Noah was laughing with a group of friends, his backpack slung casually over one shoulder. He looked so carefree, so unaware of the turmoil about to enter his life. Matthew's hand hovered over the car door handle, but he couldn't bring himself to open it. "I need to tell him," Matthew muttered to himself. "He deserves to know the truth." But as he watched Noah walk away, Matthew's resolve crumbled. The fear of Eleanor's reaction, of losing everything he had built, paralyzed him. He started the car and drove away, hating himself for his cowardice. That evening, Matthew paced in his study, rehearsing what he would say to Noah. He imagined the boy's reaction. Would he be angry? Hurt? Would he want anything to do with Matthew after learning he had been absent for so long? The sound of Eleanor's footsteps in the hallway made Matthew freeze. He quickly composed himself as she entered the room. "Matthew?" Eleanor's voice was hesitant. "Can we talk?" Matthew turned to face his wife, seeing the worry etched on her face. He wanted to confess everything right then, to unburden himself of the secrets weighing him down, but the words caught in his throat. "Of course, dear," he managed to say, forcing a smile. "What's on your mind?" As Eleanor began to speak, Matthew's guilt intensified. He knew he was running out of time. The truth would come out one way or another, and he needed to be the one to reveal it. But as he looked at Eleanor's concerned face, he found himself once again paralyzed by fear. Matthew took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew it was time to face the truth and reveal everything to Eleanor. With trembling hands, he reached out to touch her arm gently. "Eleanor, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's about why I've been so distant lately." Eleanor's eyes widened with concern. "What is it, Matthew? Please, just tell me." Matthew swallowed hard, struggling to find the right words. "Do you remember Amara, our former maid?" When Eleanor nodded, he continued. "Well, 13 years ago, I made a terrible mistake. I had an affair with her." Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Matthew, how could you?" "I'm so sorry, Eleanor. I know it was wrong," Matthew said, his voice cracking with emotion. "But there's more. Amara, she became pregnant." Eleanor's face paled as the implications of his words sank in. "You have a child?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Matthew nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "A son. His name is Noah. He's 13 now, and he's an incredible boy. I've only recently found out about him myself." As Matthew continued to explain the situation with Noah, his voice filled with a mixture of shame and pride, Eleanor's expression shifted from shock to anger. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, and her eyes blazed with hurt and betrayal. "How long have you known about this?" she demanded, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "A few weeks," Matthew admitted. "I've been trying to find the right way to tell you. I know I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid." "Afraid?" Eleanor cut him off, her voice rising. "You've been lying to me for weeks? For years?" Matthew reached out to her, but Eleanor recoiled from his touch. "Eleanor, please." I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I want to make things right." Eleanor shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Make things right? How can you possibly make this right, Matthew?" Without waiting for an answer, Eleanor turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, leaving Matthew alone with the weight of his confession. Matthew stood frozen in place, his heart sinking as he watched Eleanor storm out of the room. He could hear her angry footsteps echoing through the hallway, each one feeling like a nail in the coffin of their marriage. "Eleanor, please," he called out, his voice cracking with desperation. He rushed after her, finding her in their bedroom, yanking open drawers and throwing clothes into a suitcase. "Don't, Matthew," Eleanor said, her voice cold and sharp. "I don't want to hear any more of your lies." Matthew's shoulders slumped as he watched his wife pack. "I know I've made terrible mistakes, but please, give me a chance to explain." Eleanor whirled around to face him, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "Explain? What is there to explain? You had an affair, fathered a child, and then lied about it for years." "I was wrong, so wrong," Matthew admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I want to make things right. For you, for Noah, for all of us." Eleanor zipped up her suitcase with a forceful tug. "There is no us anymore, Matthew. I want a divorce." The word hit Matthew like a physical blow. He felt the air leave his lungs as he staggered backward. "Divorce? Eleanor, please, don't do this. We can work through this together." "Work through this?" Eleanor's laugh was bitter and hollow. "You've destroyed everything we built together. How can I ever trust you again?" Matthew reached out to her, his hand trembling. "I'll do anything, Eleanor. Please, just give me one more chance." Eleanor jerked away from his touch, her eyes flashing with anger and hurt. "You had your chance, Matthew. You had 13 years of chances to tell me the truth." She grabbed her suitcase and brushed past him, heading for the door. Matthew followed her, his mind racing as he tried to find the words to make her stay. "What about our life together?" he pleaded. "Our home? Our friends? Our future?" Eleanor paused at the front door, her hand on the knob. She turned to look at Matthew, her expression a mix of sadness and resolve. "You should have thought about that before you threw it all away." With those final words, Eleanor walked out, slamming the door behind her. Matthew stood in the empty foyer, the sound of the closing door echoing through the house. He felt as if his whole world was crumbling around him. Matthew stood in the empty foyer, his world shattered around him. The silence of the house was deafening, broken only by the sound of his ragged breathing. He stumbled to the living room, collapsing onto the couch where he and Eleanor had spent countless evenings together. With trembling hands, he pulled out his phone and dialed Amara's number. It rang twice before she answered. "Matthew, is everything okay?" Amara's voice was laced with concern. "No," he choked out, his voice barely above a whisper. "I told Eleanor everything, but she's angry. She's gone, Amara. She wants a divorce." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Oh, Matthew, I'm so sorry. What happened?" Matthew recounted the confrontation, his voice breaking as he described Eleanor's anger and hurt. "I've lost her, Amara. I've lost everything." "Not everything," Amara said gently. "You still have Noah." At the mention of his son's name, Matthew felt a fresh wave of panic wash over him. "Noah," he whispered. "What if I lose him too? What if he hates me when he finds out the truth?" "Matthew, listen to me." Amara's voice was firm but kind. "Noah doesn't know what's happening yet. Right now you need to focus on him. He's going to need you more than ever." Matthew rubbed his eyes, feeling utterly lost. "How can I face him, Amara? How can I tell him that I've been lying to him all this time?" "With honesty and love," Amara replied. "It won't be easy, but Noah deserves the truth, and he deserves a father who's willing to fight for him." Matthew took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "You're right. I can't let my fear of losing Noah keep me from being the father he needs." "That's right," Amara encouraged. "Take some time to collect yourself, and then we'll figure out how to tell Noah together." As Matthew ended the call, he felt a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos. He had made so many mistakes, but he had a chance to make things right with his son. It wouldn't be easy, but for Noah's sake, he had to try. Eleanor drove aimlessly through the city, her vision blurred by tears. The weight of Matthew's betrayal pressed heavily on her heart. She found herself at a small park, the same one where Matthew had proposed to her years ago. With a heavy sigh, she parked the car and stepped out into the cool evening air. As she walked along the familiar path, memories of her life with Matthew flooded her mind. The joy of their wedding day, the shared dreams of building a family, and the pain of their struggles with infertility. Each step brought a new wave of emotion: anger, hurt, and a deep, aching sadness. Eleanor sat on a bench overlooking a small pond, watching the ripples on the water's surface. She thought about Noah, the boy she had never met, but who was suddenly a part of her life. A son, the very thing she had longed for all these years. The irony of it all was almost too much to bear. "How could Matthew keep this from me?" she whispered to herself, her voice choked with emotion. All those years of trying, of hoping. As the initial shock began to subside, Eleanor found herself thinking about Noah more deeply. She wondered what he was like, if he had Matthew's eyes or his smile. Despite her anger towards Matthew, she couldn't help but feel a pull towards this child she had never known. Eleanor closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She thought about the life she and Matthew had built together, the love they had shared. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And now, there was Noah, a new piece of the puzzle she never knew was missing. Maybe, she thought, her heart softening slightly, maybe this is the family we were meant to have all along. The realization didn't erase the pain or the betrayal, but it opened a small door in Eleanor's heart. She knew she needed time to process, to heal, to decide what she truly wanted. But for the first time since Matthew's confession, she felt a glimmer of hope. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, Eleanor stood up. She wasn't ready to go home yet, wasn't ready to face Matthew, but she knew that running away wasn't the answer either. She needed space to think, to sort through her feelings, and to consider the possibility of a future that included not just Matthew, but Noah as well. With a deep breath, Eleanor walked back to her car, her steps a little steadier than before. She had a lot to think about, a lot to work through, but as she drove away from the park, she felt a small spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time: the possibility of a family, and the hope that love might be enough to heal even the deepest wounds. Next day, Matthew's heart raced as he sat across from Noah in the quiet corner of a local cafe. The boy's bright eyes, so much like his own, looked at him with curiosity and a hint of concern. "Noah," Matthew began, his voice barely above a whisper, "there's something important I need to tell you." Noah leaned forward, sensing the gravity in Matthew's tone. "What is it, Mr. Spencer?" Matthew took a deep breath, steeling himself for the words that would change everything. "Noah, I'm your father." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and suffocating. Noah's eyes widened, his face a mix of shock and disbelief. "What? No, that can't be true." "It is," Matthew said softly, his heart breaking at the pain in Noah's eyes. "I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, and I've regretted them every day." Noah stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're lying," he said, his voice shaking. "My mom wouldn't keep this from me." "Noah, please," Matthew pleaded, reaching out to him. "Let me explain." But Noah backed away, shaking his head. Tears welled up in his eyes as the truth sank in. "No," he said, his voice cracking. "I don't want to hear it. You abandoned us. You weren't there. And now you just show up and expect—" Noah's words trailed off as he turned and ran out of the cafe, leaving Matthew calling after him. Matthew stood there, helpless and devastated, watching his son disappear into the crowded street. He wanted to chase after Noah, to explain everything, to beg for forgiveness. But he knew that would only push the boy further away. Noah needed time to process this earth-shattering news. to work through the feelings of betrayal and confusion. Matthew sank back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. He had imagined this moment so many times, but the reality was far more painful than he could have ever anticipated. The look of hurt and betrayal in Noah's eyes would haunt him forever. As he sat there surrounded by the hustle and bustle of the cafe, Matthew felt more alone than ever. He had finally told the truth, but at what cost? He had hurt the very person he was trying to connect with, the son he had only just begun to know. Matthew knew he had to give Noah space no matter how much it pained him. He had to trust that in time, Noah might be willing to listen, to understand. But for now, all he could do was wait and hope that the damage he had caused wasn't irreparable. Matthew's heart pounded as he drove through the streets, his eyes scanning every corner for any sign of Noah. Amara sat beside him, her face etched with worry as she dialed Noah's number for the 100th time. "Still no answer," she said, her voice trembling. "Oh, Matthew, what have we done?" Matthew gripped the steering wheel tighter, guilt washing over him in waves. "We'll find him, Amara. We have to."
As they searched, Matthew's mind raced with regret. He thought back to the day Amara told him she was pregnant, how he had reacted with fear and selfishness. If only he had made a different choice then, how different things could have been.
They checked Noah's favorite spots, the library, the park, even the school. But there was no trace of him. With each passing minute, Matthew's fear grew. "I should have told him sooner," Matthew said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was so caught up in my own pride, in protecting my image, and now I might lose him forever." Amara reached out and squeezed his arm. "We both made mistakes, Matthew, but we can't give up now." As they drove past the local community center, something caught Amara's eye. "Wait!" she cried. "I think I see him!" Matthew pulled over and they both rushed out of the car. There, sitting on a bench with his head in his hands, was Noah. They approached him cautiously, not wanting to scare him away. Noah looked up, his eyes red and puffy from crying. "Noah," Matthew said softly, kneeling in front of him. "I'm so sorry. I know I've hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But please, give me a chance to explain." Noah looked at his mother, then back at Matthew. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you want me?" Matthew's heart shattered at those words. "Oh, Noah," he said, fighting back tears. "It was never about not wanting you. I was scared and selfish, and I made terrible choices. But I want you to know that not a day has gone by that I haven't regretted leaving you and your mother." Amara sat down next to Noah, putting her arm around him. "We both made mistakes, sweetie, but we love you so much, and we want to make things right." Matthew nodded, looking Noah in the eyes. "I know I can't make up for lost time, but I want to be here for you now. If you'll let me, I want to be the father you deserve." Noah wiped his eyes, looking between his parents. "I don't know if I can trust you," he said to Matthew. "How do I know you won't leave again?" "I promise you, Noah," Matthew said firmly, "I will never leave you again. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust and be a part of your life. I've missed out on so much already, and I don't want to miss another moment." Noah looked up at Matthew, his eyes brimming with tears. The pain and confusion on his face made Matthew's heart ache. For a moment, they just stared at each other, years of unspoken words hanging between them. "I'm so sorry, Noah," Matthew said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I know I've hurt you deeply, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But I want you to know that I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Noah sniffled, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "How can I believe you?" he asked, his voice small and vulnerable. Matthew knelt down, meeting Noah at eye level. "Because from this moment on, you're the most important person in my life. No matter what happens with Eleanor or anyone else, you're my son, and I love you. I'll spend every day proving that to you if I have to." Tears streamed down Matthew's face as he spoke, his words filled with sincerity and raw emotion. Noah watched him, his own eyes glistening. "I've missed out on so much, Matthew continued, his voice thick with regret. Your first steps, your first words, your first day of school. I can't get those moments back, but I promise you, Noah, I'll be there for every moment from now on, if you'll let me. Noah's lower lip trembled. He looked at Amara, who nodded encouragingly, then back at Matthew. I don't know if I can trust you yet, he said hesitantly. Matthew nodded, understanding in his eyes. I know, and that's okay. Trust takes time to build, and I'm willing to put in the work. All I'm asking for is a chance to be the father you deserve. Noah took a deep breath, considering Matthew's words. After what felt like an eternity, he spoke. Okay, he said softly. I think I'd like to try. Matthew's face lit up with hope. Really? He asked, hardly daring to believe it. Noah nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Yeah, but you have to promise. No more secrets, no more running away. I promise, Matthew said solemnly, holding out his hand. No more secrets, no more running. I'm here for you, always. Noah hesitated for a moment, then took Matthew's hand. In a surge of emotion, Matthew pulled him into a tight hug. Noah stiffened at first, then slowly relaxed, wrapping his arms around his father. As they embraced, both father and son let their tears flow freely. It was a moment of healing, of new beginnings, and of hope for the future. Amara watched, her own eyes filled with tears of joy and relief. That evening, Matthew's heart raced as he approached Eleanor's hotel room. He took a deep breath, knowing this conversation could change everything. With trembling hands, he knocked on the door. Eleanor opened it, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. Matthew, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor, please, Matthew began, his voice filled with remorse. I know I've hurt you deeply, but I need to talk to you. Can I come in? She hesitated for a moment before stepping aside, allowing him to enter. The room was dimly lit, mirroring the somber mood between them. Matthew turned to face her, his eyes brimming with tears. I'm so sorry, Eleanor, for everything. The lies, the pain I've caused you, all of it. I've been a fool, and I've taken you for granted for far too long. Eleanor crossed her arms, her face a mix of pain and uncertainty. Why should I believe you now, Matthew? After all the secrets? Matthew's shoulders slumped. You're right to doubt me. I've given you every reason to. But meeting Noah, it's changed me, Eleanor. I've realized what truly matters in life, and it's not my pride or my reputation, it's family. Eleanor's expression softened slightly at the mention of Noah. Tell me about him, she said quietly. Matthew's face lit up. He's amazing, Eleanor. He's smart, kind, and so full of life. He reminds me of you, actually. He has your compassion. Tears welled up in Eleanor's eyes. I wish I could have known him from the beginning. I wish that too, Matthew said, his voice thick with emotion. And I want to make it right. I want us to be a family, you, me, and Noah, if you'll have us. Eleanor looked at him, her eyes searching his face. Matthew, I'm still hurt. The trust between us is broken. I know, Matthew nodded, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild it. I love you, Eleanor. I always have, even when I was too stubborn to show it. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, considering his words. Finally, she spoke. I love you too, Matthew, and I want to try to rebuild our marriage, but I need you to understand something. Anything, Matthew said earnestly. If we do this, Noah has to be part of our family, completely. No more secrets, no more hiding. He deserves better than that, and so do I. Matthew's face broke into a relieved smile. Of course, that's all I want too. Noah, you, me, a real family. Eleanor nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope herself. It won't be easy, Matthew. We have a lot of trust to rebuild. I know, he said earnestly. and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Counseling, spending more time together, anything you need. Eleanor reached out, tentatively taking Matthew's hand. We'll take it one day at a time, she said. But I want to meet Noah. I want to know the boy who's captured your heart so completely. Matthew squeezed her hand gently. He'll love you, Eleanor. I know he will. Eleanor nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. Then let's go home, Matthew. We have a lot of work to do, but I think we can do it together. Matthew reached out, taking Eleanor's hand in his. As they left the hotel room, both felt a glimmer of hope for their future, a future that now included Noah. As they sat there, hands clasped, both felt a sense of new beginning. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, they faced it together. Days turned into weeks, and Matthew and Amara found themselves falling into a comfortable rhythm of co-parenting Noah. They supported him in every decision, big or small, from his academic pursuits to his extracurricular activities. Matthew marveled at how easily Amara had always navigated parenthood, and he was grateful for her patience as he learned to be the father Noah deserved. Eleanor, true to her word, warmly accepted Noah's presence in their lives. She made a genuine effort to get to know the boy, inviting him over for dinners and spending time with him whenever he visited. At first, Noah was hesitant, unsure of how to act around Eleanor, but her kindness and sincere interest in his life soon put him at ease. As the weeks passed, Noah found himself spending more and more time at Matthew and Eleanor's house. He enjoyed having a place where both his parents could be together, even if they weren't a couple. Eleanor's acceptance meant the world to him, and he started to feel like he truly belonged. One warm Saturday evening, the unlikely family gathered for dinner at Matthew and Eleanor's home. The dining room was filled with the aroma of a home-cooked meal, something that had become more common since Eleanor had taken an interest in cooking for their expanded family. Matthew sat at the head of the table, looking around with a sense of wonder. Amara was to his right, chatting animatedly with Eleanor about a new recipe they wanted to try. Noah sat across from his mother, his eyes bright as he recounted a funny story from school. As Eleanor brought out the main course, a beautifully roasted chicken, Matthew couldn't help but feel a wave of emotion wash over him. This was everything he never knew he wanted. His son, the mother of his child, and his wife, all together in harmony. "This looks amazing, Eleanor," Amara said warmly, helping to serve the sides. Eleanor beamed with pride. "Thank you, Amara. I hope it tastes as good as it looks." Noah took a big bite and grinned. "It's delicious. Way better than Dad's cooking." Everyone laughed, including Matthew, who playfully ruffled Noah's hair. "Hey now, I'm learning." As they ate, the conversation flowed easily. They talked about Noah's upcoming science fair project, Amara's work, and Matthew and Eleanor's plans for their anniversary. There was no tension, no awkwardness, just the warmth of family and the joy of being together. If you enjoyed the story of Matthew, Eleanor, Amara, and Noah, I handpicked this next story that will touch your heart. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.